Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. Here's the thing about galactic education. It sounds great on paper. Hundreds of species, thousands of students, all coming together in the spirit of unity and knowledge sharing. The Interstellar Academy, perched on an orbital station above Proxima 5, gleaming like a jewel in the void. Promotional materials practically wrote themselves. What those promotional materials didn't mention? The absolute chaos of cramming apex predators, hive minds, energy beings, and one very unlucky selection of humans into the same classroom and expecting everyone to play nice. Spoiler alert, they did not play nice. The Academy had been operating for 63 standard cycles without major incident. Sure, there were the occasional cultural misunderstandings, like when the methane breathers accidentally poisoned an entire wing, or the time a phasing species walked through the wrong wall and saw things they could never unsee. But nothing serious, nothing violent. Then humanity showed up and ruined everything. Well, not ruined. Enhanced? Complicated? Let's go with complicated. First contact happened 8 months ago, practically yesterday in galactic terms, and the powers that be decided the best way to integrate humanity into the wider universe was through education. Send some humans to the Academy, let them learn about alien cultures, let alien cultures learn about them. Everyone holds hands and sings Kumbaya in 17 different atmospheric compositions. 6 humans. They sent 6 humans to an academy of 3,000 students. Looking back, that number feels almost intentionally cruel. Naomi was one of those 6, and if you asked her on that particular morning whether she regretted applying for the exchange program, she would have said yes, emphatically, possibly while crying. 19 standard years old, 21 in Earth years, because humans had to be difficult about literally everything, including time measurement, studying xenobiology because she'd always been fascinated by life in all its forms. Noble goal, pure intentions, the kind of idealistic dream that the universe just loves to chew up and spit out. She'd been at the Academy for 5 weeks. 5 weeks of stares, whispers, and that special kind of attention that made her skin crawl. Most aliens treated humans like walking bombs, careful, cautious, maintaining distance. Earth was classified as a Class 12 Deathworld, which apparently put it in the top 3% of planets that will absolutely murder you across the known galaxy. The administration had implemented something called the Human Caution Protocol within days of their arrival. It included gems like, do not startle the humans, do not restrict the humans' movement, do not engage in aggressive posturing near the humans, and Naomi's personal favorite, remember that humans are endurance persistence hunters and may interpret pursuit as a threat. Most species took this seriously. Keyword, most. The xenobiology classroom was a marvel of adaptive engineering. Atmospheric zones, gravity wells, pressure chambers, all designed so that beings from radically different environments could learn together. Naomi sat in the standard atmosphere section, which accommodated about 60% of known species. Oxygen breathers, the galactic mainstream. Her desk was 3rd row, left side. She'd chosen it strategically, close enough to see the holo displays, far enough from the door to avoid being the first one noticed during attendance. Invisibility had become her goal, her dream, her desperate, impossible aspiration. Nyx occupied the seat to her right, a Lepidian whose species resembled moths, if moths were 4 feet tall and could speak in harmonic overtones, soft, perpetually nervous, with compound eyes that reflected light in dizzying patterns. They'd bonded over a shared love of cellular biology and mutual social anxiety. Pitch sat behind them, a resonite, which meant they were essentially a collection of crystalline structures that hummed at specific frequencies to communicate. Imagine if a geode gained consciousness and a personality, and that personality was aggressively helpful. These were Naomi's friends, her only friends. Two beings who saw her as something other than a walking hazard sign. Then there was Ralknor the Mighty, as he introduced himself to anyone within earshot. Though most people just called him Ralk, because ain't nobody got time for that level of self-importance. A Quelmati, which in practical terms meant 8 feet of chitinous nightmare fuel. 4 arms, serrated mandibles, armor plating that could deflect small arms fire, and an ego that could be seen from orbit. His species were apex predators from a heavy-gravity world, ambush hunters who'd clawed their way to the top of their food chain through sheer viciousness. In the modern galaxy, they'd parlayed that into a reputation as elite soldiers and enforcers. Scary? Absolutely. Untouchable? In Rock's case, apparently yes. See, Rock's parent, Orthol, was a war general in the Quelmati military command. High-ranking, well-connected, the kind of political weight that made academy administrators sweat through their various excretory systems. Which meant Ralk had something precious, something powerful, something that made him absolutely insufferable. Diplomatic immunity. For 3 weeks, he'd made Naomi's life a walking nightmare. It started small, comments about human fragility, jokes about Deathworld organisms being all snarl, no bite, speculation about whether she'd cry if he looked at her too hard. Then it escalated, flicking her chair during lectures, knocking her data pad off her desk. Accidentally, bumping into her in the corridors with enough force to send her stumbling. The other students watched. The instructors noticed. Nobody did anything. Because that's how power works, right? Doesn't matter if you're human or Quelmati or a sentient cloud of ionized gas. Bullies are universal, and they thrive in systems that protect them. Naomi reported it once. The administration thanked her for her concern, assured her they'd look into it, and then did absolutely nothing. The human caution protocol apparently didn't include provisions for what happened when someone else violated it first. So she endured, kept her head down, tried to be invisible. Today's lecture was on Deathworld adaptations. Oh, the irony. And Professor Merlot was in fine form. The elderly Archon drifted at the front of the class, his translucent form rippling with each gesture, voice resonating through the translation matrix in soothing tones. Deathworlds produce remarkable evolutionary pressures, Merlot explained, a holodisplay showing rotating images of various hostile planets. The organisms that survive develop extraordinary capabilities. Redundant organs, accelerated healing, enhanced sensory perception, aggressive territorial behaviors. Thunk. Something hit the back of Naomi's head. Small, hard. She didn't turn around, didn't react, just kept her eyes forward, stylus moving across her datapad. Thunk. Another projectile. This one bounced off her shoulder. Nyx's wings fluttered anxiously beside her, the Lepideian equivalent of a worried glance. Naomi gave the tiniest shake of her head. Don't engage. Don't give him the satisfaction. Fascinating to note that Deathworld species often exhibit what we call overclock potential, Merlot continued, oblivious. The ability to temporarily exceed normal physical limitations through chemical processes. Adrenaline in humans, combat stim in Quelmati, rage spore in fungal collectives. Her datapad flickered. Naomi frowned, tapping the screen. It flickered again, Then the display started to distort, text bleeding into corrupted colors. No, 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 no. The screen went dark, completely dead. She turned it over, and her stomach dropped. Corrosive gel. Someone had poured corrosive gel into the seam where the screen met the casing. The entire back panel was smoking slightly, plastic bubbling and warping. 3 months of notes. Her entire semester project. Gone. She turned in her seat. Rock sat 2 rows back, all forearms folded, mandibles clicking in what his species considered a smile. In his upper left hand, he held a small vial, empty now, of industrial solvent. The kind used in the chemistry labs. The kind that was definitely not supposed to leave the chemistry labs. Their eyes met. His were compound, multifaceted, completely devoid of empathy. Problem, human. His voice buzzed through the translator with barely suppressed amusement. Naomi felt something shift in her chest. A tightness, a heat that started in her core and radiated outward. She stood. The chair scraped against the floor, loud in the suddenly quiet classroom. Everyone was watching now. "I'm leaving," she said, voice flat. She'd file another complaint. It wouldn't matter. It never mattered. But she'd do it anyway. Because what else was there? She moved toward the aisle. Rock stood too, 8 feet of armored muscle blocking her path. "Leaving already?" He tilted his head, mandibles spreading. "But we're learning about Deathworld adaptations. I thought you'd want to explain how your soft little species managed to survive. Must have been lots of hiding. Lots of running away." The class watched. Mirlo had stopped mid-sentence, floating uncertainly. Naomi tried to step around him. Rock sidestepped, blocking her again. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "You're excused." He didn't move. Something in her peripheral vision, Nyx, starting to rise. Naomi caught their eye, shook her head slightly. "Don't." She didn't want anyone else involved in this. Didn't want anyone else to become a target. "I just want to leave," Naomi said. "So leave." Rock spread all 4 arms in an exaggerated gesture. "You're a human, a Deathworlder. Surely you're not afraid of—" He shoved her. Not a tap, not a bump. A full-force, 4-armed, 8-foot-tall apex predator shove, delivered with roughly 30% of his species' maximum strength, which was still more than enough to put most species in the medical bay. Naomi stumbled backward 3 steps, arms windmilling. Her hip caught the edge of a desk. She didn't fall, though. Didn't go down. Just stopped. Regained her balance. Straightened. And something in her expression changed. Later, when campus security reviewed the footage, they'd note this moment. The exact second when Naomi's face shifted from shock to something else entirely. Something that made the Quelmati in the review room shift uncomfortably. Because here's what the galaxy forgot about Deathworlders. They didn't survive by running away. They survived by being more stubborn, more vicious, more absolutely unwilling to quit than anything else on their respective hellscape planets. Earth didn't produce prey animals that got lucky. It produced persistence hunters who could track wounded prey for days. It produced omnivores who looked at apex predators and thought, food. It produced a species that climbed to the top of the food chain despite lacking claws, venom, armor, or any natural weapons besides their minds and their absolute refusal to accept defeat. Ralk had just shoved a human. A real human. Not the careful, protocol-following, trying-to-fit-in version. The underneath version. The one that still had access to 4 billion years of evolutionary programming that screamed one very simple message. Threat detected. Respond accordingly. Naomi's heart rate spiked, 60 beats per minute to 120 in under 2 seconds. Adrenal glands dumped their contents into her bloodstream. Oxygen uptake increased, pupils dilated. Peripheral vision sharpened, even as her focus tunneled to a single point. The threat in front of her. The Quelmati standing there, mandibles spread, expecting fear or tears or pleading. Getting something very, very different. 10 seconds. That's how long it took. The galaxy would talk about those 10 seconds for cycles to come. Second one. Naomi closed the distance between them before Ralk could process what was happening. 3 steps. Fast, deliberate, inside his reach before those 4 arms could react. Humans were slow compared to most species, right? That's what the databases said. Clumsy. Uncoordinated. The databases were measuring average movement, not combat movement. Not the explosive burst of speed that came from muscle groups evolved for throwing spears at prey that could outrun them over short distances. Second 2. Rock started to bring his upper arms around, an instinctive defensive posture, but Naomi was already there, already moving. She'd spent 5 weeks in xenobiology class, 5 weeks studying anatomy, 5 weeks looking at cross-sections and skeletal structures, and pressure points, because that's what good students do, right? Right. Second 3. Her fist connected with the left side of his mandible joint, the spot where chitinous plate met softer connective tissue. She'd seen it in the holo displays, knew it was there, aimed for it with the kind of precision that came from a species that used to kill dinner by throwing rocks at it from 30 meters away. The impact made a sound, kind of a crunch-click combination that would haunt the nightmares of everyone in that classroom for weeks. Second 4. Rock's head snapped sideways. Not far, his neck musculature was designed to absorb impact, but far enough that his compound eyes went wide, far enough that his mandibles stopped clicking. That actually hurt. See, here's the thing about Quelmati physiology. They were ambush predators, built for the first strike. Incredible burst strength, armor that could shrug off most attacks, intimidation factor off the charts. But they weren't built for extended combat, weren't built to fight something that hit back with any real force. And Naomi, soft, fragile Deathworld Naomi, hit with the force of evolutionary biology that the galaxy hadn't properly calculated. Human bone density averaged 3 times galactic standard. Human muscle attachment points created leverage that turned their frames into kinetic energy transfer systems. Humans had something called a kinetic chain. Hips rotating, core engaging, shoulder driving forward. All that momentum channeling through a fist that weighed maybe a quarter kilo, but carried the force of their entire body behind it. Pneumatic striking power, the xenobiology texts called it. Ralk just called it pain. Second 5. His upper left arm swung at her, still instinct, still thinking this was something he could control, but Naomi had already shifted. Elbow strike, short and brutal, into the gap where his thorax plate met his primary lung analog. She wasn't trained, had never thrown a punch before coming to the academy. Didn't know proper form or technique. Didn't matter. Because underneath the civilized veneer, underneath the social conditioning and the education and the culture, every human carried the genetic memory of a species that survived the Ice Age, the plague, the megafauna, and each other. Violence wasn't foreign to them. It was dormant, waiting. Second 6. Rock staggered. Actually staggered. 8 feet and 400 pounds of apex predator, taking an involuntary step backward because a 19-year-old human girl was hitting him, and it hurt, and his brain couldn't reconcile those 2 facts. The classroom had gone completely silent. Not the anticipatory silence from before. This was the shocked silence of witnessing something that violated fundamental assumptions about how the universe worked. Second 8. Naomi drove her knee up, not fancy, not pretty, just pure force, into the soft joint where Rolk's lower abdomen met his leg segment. Another weak point, another thing she'd studied, another piece of information filed away, because knowledge was power, and Naomi had been very, very powerless for 3 weeks. Not anymore. Second 9. Rolk went down. All 4 arms flailed. Less attacking now, more trying to break his fall. His mandibles clacked frantically, sounds coming out that the translator couldn't parse because they weren't words, just pure surprise and pain and confusion. The floor shook when he hit it. Literally shook. 400 pounds of mass-meeting metal decking. Second 10. Naomi stood over him, breathing hard. Her knuckles were split. Human skin wasn't meant to punch chitin armor. Blood running down her fingers in thin streams. Her hip throbbed where it had hit the desk. Her heart hammered at her ribs like it was trying to escape. But she was standing. And Rolk wasn't. The universe took a breath. Then exhaled chaos. Nyx made a sound like wind through broken glass. Shock and awe mixed with something that might have been pride. Pitch hummed a frequency that translated roughly to, "Oh, holy minerals." Professor Merlot just floated there, translucent form flickering with what might have been the Archon equivalent of a system crash. Rolk rolled onto his side, or tried to, multiple arms scrabbling for purchase. One of his mandibles hung at an angle that mandibles definitely were not supposed to hang. His thorax plate had a visible crack running through it. He was making sounds that didn't need translation. Pain was universal. "You," he managed, voice stuttering through the translator. "You broke my—" "Yeah," Naomi said quietly. Her voice shook. Not from fear. From adrenaline still flooding her system, from muscles trembling with exertion, from the sudden horrifying realization of what she'd just done. "I did." The classroom door burst open. Campus security, 3 of them, different species, all armed with stunners. They took in the scene. Rolk on the floor, Naomi standing, blood on her hands, an entire class of witnesses frozen in various states of shock. "Nobody move," the lead security officer said. A mandrite, crystalline and vaguely humanoid. Their visual sensors swept the room. "What happened here?" Everybody spoke at once. Well, not everybody. Most of the class started talking, shouting, explaining, contradicting. The mandrite's sensors flickered rapidly, trying to process the input. "One at a time," they said, voice modulating into something that cut through the noise. "You," they pointed at Merlot. "Instructor, report." Poor Merlot. The Archon rippled with distress, form pulsing erratically. There was... The student Rolk engaged in physical contact with student Naomi. And then she attacked me, Rolk spat from the floor. Unprovoked. Savage. This is what happens when you let Deathworlders into civilized space. "That's not what happened," Nyx said. Their voice came out stronger than Naomi had ever heard it. "He's been bullying her for weeks. Today he destroyed her datapad. Then he shoved her. We all saw it." Pitch hummed in agreement. "Frequencies confirm." Rolk initiated physical aggression. Naomi responded defensively. "Defensively?" Rolk managed something between a laugh and a wheeze. "She destroyed my mandible, cracked my thorax. That's not defense, that's what happens when you shove a Deathworlder," someone else said. Naomi couldn't see who. Her vision was still tunneled, adrenaline still singing in her blood. The security officers moved in. One helped Rolk to his feet, all 4 of them, technically. He swayed, armor plates clicking against each other. Another officer approached Naomi carefully, like she might explode. "Miss," they said gently, "I need you to come with us. Medical bay, then administrative holding. Naomi nodded, didn't trust her voice. Her hands were shaking now, delayed shock setting in. She'd actually. I'm coming too, Nick said immediately. And I, Pitch added, harmonics, firm. The security officer didn't argue. They escorted all of them out, Rock limping on multiple legs, Naomi walking steadily, but feeling like her bones had turned to liquid, her two friends flanking her like bodyguards. The corridors were full of students between classes. They stopped, stared, watched the procession pass, a broken Quelmati, a blood-handed human, and two small aliens walking like they'd just witnessed the birth of a legend. Someone would probably write songs about this. Terrible songs, but songs nonetheless. The medical bay was a chaos of adaptive environment chambers, different atmospheres, different gravities, different everything. The doctor on duty was a medicant named Aulnix, six-limbed and perpetually frazzled, who took one look at the arrivals and made a sound that didn't need translation. That was the universal sound of, "Why is my shift like this?" "Trauma Bay 1, she said, pointing Rock toward a chamber suited for his atmosphere. "Examination Room 3 for the human. Somebody tell me what in the name of the founders happened." They told her. She listened. Her expression, multiple eyes on stalks, very expressive, cycled through disbelief, concern, and something that might have been poorly suppressed amusement. "Let me understand," Aulnix said slowly. "The Quelmati shoved the human, and the human won?" "I didn't win," Naomi said quietly from the examination table. Her hands were in a sterilization field, the cuts already being treated. "I just reacted." "Naomi," Aulnix said, "you fractured a Quelmati mandible, cracked thorax armor that's rated to deflect projectile weapons? That's not reacting. I don't even know what that is." She ran a scanner over Naomi's body, watching the readouts with increasing confusion. "Your stress hormones are elevated but declining. Minor bruising on your hip and shoulder. Split knuckles. That's it. That's all the damage. Is that bad? Bad? Child, you just fought one of the galaxy's apex predators and walked away with scraped knuckles. Your species' healing factor is already closing the wounds. I'm reading cellular regeneration rates that shouldn't be possible without medical intervention." Aulnix sat back on 4 of her 6 limbs. "What are you people made of?" "Spite, mostly," Naomi said. It came out before she could stop it. "Exhaustion made you honest." Aulnix laughed. Actually laughed. Then caught herself. "Don't tell anyone I found that funny. I have a professional reputation." In the trauma bay, Rock was getting fitted for reconstructive plating. His mandible would heal, eventually. The thorax crack was more serious, would need weeks of regeneration therapy. His ego, though? That might never recover. The Arbiter's office smelled like ozone and paperwork, the universal constants of bureaucracy, apparently. Naomi sat in a chair designed for species with different leg configurations, which meant she was vaguely uncomfortable, but not actively dying. Progress. Arbiter Pelmoon floated behind their desk, tentacles moving in patterns that suggested deep thought or possibly indigestion. Hard to tell with non-corporeal species. The floating administrator had been reviewing security footage for the past 20 minutes, occasionally pausing, rewinding, watching again. "Fascinating," Pelmoon said finally. Their voice resonated through the translation matrix with careful neutrality. "Miss Naomi, do you understand the severity of what occurred?" "Yes." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. The adrenaline had worn off hours ago, leaving her hollow and tired. "You assaulted a fellow student, caused significant physical harm. The Quelmathi delegation is already filing formal complaints. Rock's parent, War General Orthol, is en route to the station as we speak. Pelmoon's tentacles coiled tighter. The Academy has protocols, strict protocols regarding violence between students. He shoved me first. It sounded weak even to her ears. Childish. But it was true. And that is noted. However, the response was disproportionate. Pelmoon pulled up the footage again, letting it play. On the holo display, 10 seconds of violence, captured in perfect clarity. You could have reported the incident, called for help. Instead, you engaged in combat. Naomi watched herself on the screen, watched that shift in her expression, the sudden movement, the brutal efficiency. She barely recognized the person throwing those punches. "I've been reporting incidents for 3 weeks," she said quietly. Nothing happened. He had diplomatic immunity. Everyone knew what he was doing. Nobody cared until I made them care. "That's not—" Pelmoon started, then stopped. Tentacles rippled with something that might have been frustration. The process takes time. We have to navigate political considerations. While I get bullied, while we find appropriate solutions that don't involve violence. You didn't find anything, though, did you? Naomi looked up, meeting whatever passed for Pelmoon's eyes. In 3 weeks, what changed? What got better? Or were you just hoping I'd eventually drop out so the problem would solve itself? The silence stretched. Uncomfortable. Telling. This academy has educational and diplomatic missions that supersede individual. The door chimed. Pelmoon's tentacles twitched with irritation. "I'm in the middle of—" The door opened anyway. Nix and Pitch stood there, and behind them. Others. Lots of others. Students of every species, size, and configuration packed into the corridor outside. "Arbiter Pelmoon," Nix said, wings fluttering but voice steady, "we need to speak with you. It's about Rolk and Naomi and everything that's been happening." Pelmoon's form flickered. "This is highly irregular. I'm conducting an official inquiry." "Then inquire officially," Pitch hummed, "but you need to hear what we have to say. All of us." What followed was unprecedented. One by one, students filed into the office, or connected via HoloLink when the room filled past capacity, and told their stories. The Lepidian whose wing Rolk had torn during a training accident. The Resonite whose research crystals he'd shattered. The small aquatic species he'd dumped out of their mobility tank as a joke. The list went on, and on, and on. 32 students. 32 separate incidents spanning 5 months. Some minor, some serious. All unreported because what was the point? Rolk had diplomatic immunity. Rolk's parent was powerful. Rolk was untouchable. Until he touched the one student who could touch back. "Why didn't you report these incidents?" Pelmoon asked, though the answer was obvious. "We did," a chlorophyte said, leaves rustling with agitation. "I filed 3 separate complaints. They were all dismissed pending further investigation. That investigation never happened." "I told my advisor," added a thermal dweller through their environmental suit. "They said to avoid confrontation, to give Rolk space, to be understanding of cultural differences." Their flames burned sardonic. "Apparently, his culture's difference is being a massive waste of organic compounds." Pelmoon was very, very quiet. "The human did what none of us could," Nick said. "Not because she's brave, not because she's special, but because she's from a death world. And when someone from a death world says enough, they mean it. The rest of us, we're not built for confrontation. We freeze. We flee. We hope someone else handles it." "But nobody did," Pitch added, frequency rising. "Until today." The arbiter reviewed the complaints, pulled up records that had been filed and forgotten, incidents documented and dismissed. The evidence was damning, not for Naomi, for the academy itself. "This changes things," Pelmoon said slowly. "Does it?" Naomi asked. "Or are you going to expel me anyway because it's easier than dealing with an angry war general?" She expected deflection, maybe anger. Instead, Pelmoon's tentacles straightened, the equivalent of a spine stiffening. "Miss Naomi, I want to be very clear about something. This academy was founded on principles of mutual respect and safe learning environments. If we've failed to provide that, if we've allowed political considerations to compromise student welfare, then we've failed our core mission." The arbiter's form pulsed with what might have been resolve. "You will not be expelled. In fact, I'm suspending the inquiry into your actions pending a full investigation into Rolk's behavior." The students erupted, not with protest, with relief. Weeks of tension releasing all at once. "However," Pelmoon continued, "we still have a problem. War General Orthol will arrive within the day, and I doubt very much that he'll accept his offspring's expulsion quietly." "Then don't expel Rolk," someone said. Everyone turned. The speaker was a large gravitite, stone-like, slow-moving, generally non-confrontational. "Transfer him. Different academy. Different system. Somewhere his parents' influence doesn't reach. Somewhere he has to actually follow rules. And if the war general objects, then we show him the footage," Pitch said. "Not just today's incident. Everything, every complaint, every witness statement. And we remind him that diplomatic immunity doesn't mean immunity from consequences." It was a gamble, a huge one, the kind that could backfire spectacularly. Pelmoon considered it. Then, "I'll draft the proposal. But I want something understood. All of you." The arbiter's attention swept the room. Violence is not the answer. What happened today was an aberration, a failure of our systems that forced a student into an impossible situation. We will do better. We must do better. "Agreed," Nick said. "But also, don't shove Deathworlders. That seems like a reasonable addendum to the Student Conduct Code." "Despite everything," Naomi laughed. It came out slightly hysterical, but still. Laughter. War General Orthol arrived 8 hours later, and he was everything Rolk aspired to be. Massive, armored, radiating controlled lethality. His ship docked with the EB kind of efficiency that suggested military precision, and he strode through the station like he owned it. Pelmoon met him in the main administrative chamber, neutral territory, heavily monitored. Naomi wasn't present. Neither was Rolk. Just the arbiter, the war general, and 200-plus students who'd gathered outside in silent support. The conversation lasted an hour. Voices were raised. Threats were implied. Then Pelmoon showed him the evidence. All of it. Every complaint, every witness statement, every second of footage documenting months of systematic bullying. Then they showed him the 10 seconds. Orthol watched his offspring shove a human. Watched that human's expression change. Watched the fight that wasn't really a fight, just a biological reality check delivered in real time. When it finished, the war general was quiet for a long moment. "That's a human?" he asked finally. "Yes. A baseline human. Not enhanced, not trained." "Correct." Another pause. "And my offspring attacked this human unprovoked." "The evidence supports that conclusion." Orthol made a sound, deep, resonant, untranslatable. "Then my offspring is a fool, and I raised a fool, which makes me a worse fool." He turned to Pelmoon. You're expelling him. Transferring. To an academy where he can learn discipline without the protection of his lineage. Good. He needs it. Should have sent him there to begin with. The war general's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. I want to meet the human. That's not advisable. Not asking permission, Arbiter. I want to meet the organism that humbled a Quelmati in single combat. Consider it educational. They brought Naomi to a secure meeting room. Just her, Orthol, and enough security to handle a small war. She sat across from 8 feet of apex predator and tried not to think about how easily he could snap her in half. You're smaller than I expected, Orthol said. I get that a lot. His mandibles spread. Amusement. My offspring attacked you. You responded. This is understood. Yes, sir. Do you know what we teach young Quelmati warriors? No, sir. We teach them to assess threats accurately, to know when they face a superior opponent, to recognize danger before engaging. He leaned forward slightly. My offspring failed every lesson. Saw soft skin and assumed weakness. Saw small size and assumed helplessness. Paid for that assumption with his pride and his mandible. Naomi said nothing. What could she say? Your species conquered a Class 12 Deathworld, Orthol continued, climbed to the top of your food chain with nothing but stubbornness and tools, and we thought that made you soft, civilized, safe. His laugh was sharp. We were wrong. You're not safe. You're just patient. He stood, all 4 arms moving in what might have been a salute or a gesture of respect. I owe you no apology. You injured my offspring in fair combat. But I will ensure he learns from this. Learns what I should have taught him. Respect is not given by rank. It's earned through conduct. He paused at the door. Also, your species terrifies me now. I thought you should know. Then he left. Just like that. Leaving Naomi sitting there, processing the fact that she'd apparently scared a war general. 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks in which Naomi became the most talked-about student in Academy history. Not the most liked. Opinions varied wildly depending on who you asked. But definitely the most discussed. The human who broke a Quelmati. The Deathworlder who actually lived up to the hype. The girl who proved that soft skin didn't mean soft spine. She hated it. Every second of it. The stares in the corridors. The whispers that stopped when she walked past. The wide berth that students gave her now, like she might explode without warning. Some looked at her with admiration. Others with fear. A few with barely concealed resentment. None of it felt good. Ralk was gone, transferred to a military academy 3 systems away, where diplomatic immunity meant absolutely nothing, and consequences were delivered swiftly and without mercy. His parent had personally overseen the transfer, making it very clear that failure would not be tolerated. The Academy administration had quietly updated several policies. The Human Caution Protocol now included an addendum about human stress responses and defensive capabilities. There was also a new, much stricter anti-bullying framework with actual enforcement mechanisms. Progress. Built on the broken mandible of someone who'd thought himself untouchable. Naomi tried to return to normal. Attended classes, took notes, studied for exams. But normal had shifted. Students who'd never spoken to her before suddenly wanted to be friends. Others avoided her entirely. The dynamics had changed in ways she couldn't quite navigate. Nix and Pitch stuck close, loyal as ever. But even they treated her differently now. Not badly, just carefully. Like she was something fragile and dangerous at the same time. On the 14th day after the incident, Naomi found a message waiting on her data pad. Anonymous, routed through multiple proxies. Thank you. That was it. 2 words. No signature. Then another message arrived. And another. Different accounts. Same sentiment. Students she'd never met thanking her for what she'd done. For standing up. For fighting back when nobody else could. 32 messages. 1 from each student who'd testified. She sat in her dorm room and cried. Not from sadness. From the sheer weight of it all. She hadn't meant to be anyone's hero. Hadn't wanted to be a symbol. Just wanted to be left alone to study xenobiology and maybe make a few friends. Instead, she'd become a reminder that Deathworlders were called that for a reason. The self-defense class wasn't her idea. That was all pitch. You should teach, the Resonite had said one evening in the cafeteria. Teach others what you did, how you did it. I don't know how to teach fighting. Don't even know how to fight properly. I just reacted. Exactly. Most of us freeze when threatened. We don't know how to react. You could change that. Pitch, I'm not a martial artist. I'm a biology student who got lucky. 43 students have asked me if you'd be willing to instruct them in defensive techniques. Pitch's frequency shifted to smug. I've been keeping a list. You what? I may have mentioned the possibility in passing to a few individuals who mentioned it to others, who mentioned it to their entire social clusters. So now there's demand, supply and demand, very economic, much capitalism. Naomi stared at them. You're impossible. I prefer proactive. So, will you do it? She shouldn't. Had no qualifications, no experience, no business teaching anyone anything about combat or self-defense. But those messages, 32 thank yous from students who'd finally felt safe enough to speak up, because she'd shown them it was possible to fight back. 1 class, Naomi said, 1 trial class. If it goes badly, we never speak of it again. Deal. The gymnasium was designed for multi-species athletic activities, which meant variable gravity zones and atmospheric controls. Naomi had requested standard atmosphere, Earth normal gravity. Figured if people wanted to learn human defensive techniques, they should experience human conditions. She expected maybe 10 students. Hoped for 5. 40 showed up. 40 students of various species, sizes, and physical configurations, all looking at her with expressions ranging from curious to desperate. The gymnasium suddenly felt very small. Naomi said eloquently. Hi, so, I'm not really qualified for this. You defeated a Quelmati in 10 seconds, someone called out. A thermic, flames burning eager. You're qualified. I got lucky. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity, Nix said from the front row, being aggressively supportive. You prepared by studying anatomy. Opportunity knocked. You answered with fists. Despite herself, Naomi smiled. Okay, but we need to establish something right now. I don't know proper martial arts. What I did was instinct and adrenaline. And honestly, a lot of anger. What I can teach you is basic principles. Distance management, targeting, using what you have. She paused, looking at the assembled students. Most of you aren't built like humans. You're faster or stronger or have natural weapons. But you also freeze when threatened. Your species didn't evolve as persistence hunters, didn't spend millennia fighting each other and everything else on your planets. That's not weakness. That's just different evolutionary pressures. A small aquaform raised a fin. So, how do we overcome that? You don't. Not completely. But you can train your brain to respond differently, to see threat and think action instead of freeze, to understand your body's capabilities and use them. She walked to the center of the mat. Who wants to volunteer? Everyone stepped back. Naomi sighed. Come on. I'm not going to hurt anyone. This is about learning. Reluctantly, a lithoid stepped forward. Rock-based species, sturdy but slow. What do you need me to do? Approach me like you're threatening. Don't actually touch me, just simulate aggression. The lithoid moved forward, arms raised in what was probably meant to be intimidating. Naomi waited until they were within range, then smoothly stepped to the side. See that? Distance management. If someone's attacking, your first priority is not being where their attack is. Sounds obvious, but most beings freeze in place. She demonstrated again, the lithoid moving, Naomi flowing around them. Your species is slow but durable. You can't dodge everything, but you can position yourself so hits land on your stonework instead of your vulnerable joints. She spent the next hour running through basics, not techniques exactly, more concepts, how to assess threats, how to identify weak points in anatomy, any anatomy, how to use momentum against opponents, how to know when to fight and when to run. Running is valid, she emphasized. Survival is the goal. Pride is stupid. If you can escape, escape. Fighting should always be the last option. But what if we can't escape? Asked a young chlorophyte. What if we're cornered? Naomi met their eyes. Then you make them regret cornering you. You use everything you have. Teeth, claws, whatever natural weapons your species has. You target vulnerabilities, and you don't stop until you're safe. That sounds brutal, someone muttered. It is. Violence is brutal. That's why we avoid it. But if someone forces it on you? She thought about Ralk, about 3 weeks of bullying, about that final shove. Then you respond with everything you have. Not because you want to hurt them, because you want them to stop. The session ended with students practicing on each other, carefully, controlled, with Naomi supervising to ensure nobody actually got hurt. It was chaotic and messy, and half the techniques didn't translate across species lines. It was also the most engaged she'd seen any of them, the most empowered. Afterward, as students filed out, a small group approached, the same ones who'd testified against Ralk. Thank you, the Lepidian said. Not the same one, a different individual, wings patterned differently. Not just for the class, for everything. You didn't have to stand up to Ralk, could have just endured it. Enduring wasn't working, Naomi said quietly. No, but most would have kept trying anyway. You didn't. You fought back, and it gave the rest of us permission to speak up. The Lepidian's wings fluttered. That matters more than you know. They left. Naomi stood in the empty gymnasium, processing. She hadn't wanted to be a symbol, hadn't wanted attention or fame or any of this, just wanted to study alien biology and maybe not get bullied. But maybe that was the point. Maybe heroes weren't. People who sought out danger. Maybe they were just people who got tired of accepting unacceptable situations. Later that evening, Naomi sat in her dorm with Nix and Pitch, reviewing class notes. Well, she was reviewing. Nix was doing complex calculations. Pitch was humming tunelessly. Question, Pitch said suddenly. Do all humans fight like you? Naomi looked up. What? Like you. That level of capability. Is it standard? I'm really not special. If anything, I'm below average. Never played sports, never trained in anything. Just baseline human. Baseline, Nix repeated slowly. You're telling me that what we witnessed, the speed, the precision, the raw stopping power, is baseline for your species? More or less. What's above baseline? Pitch asked. Naomi thought about Olympic athletes, military personnel, professional fighters, people who actually trained their entire lives for combat. "You really don't want to meet above baseline," she said. The two aliens exchanged glances, some kind of silent communication. "What?" Naomi asked. "Nothing," Nick said innocently. "Just reconsidering some assumptions about human fragility." "And making a note," Pitch added, "to never ever anger one of your soldiers." Probably wise. They returned to their work. Outside the dorm window, the academy sprawled across the station. Thousands of students from hundreds of worlds, all learning together. Most of them now very aware that the humans walking among them weren't the soft, fragile beings they'd assumed. Naomi pulled up a new file on her datapad. Her semester project, the one Rolk had destroyed, needed to be rebuilt from scratch. Topic: Comparative anatomical vulnerabilities across Deathworld species. She had a lot of practical research now. Across the station, in the administration center, Arbiter Pelmoon was updating the official Academy records, incident reports, policy changes, a whole new section on interspecies conflict resolution, and at the bottom of Naomi's student file, a small notation: Caution, Deathworld baseline, handle with appropriate respect. The same notation that now appeared on every human student file. Because the galaxy had learned something important. Humans weren't dangerous despite being from a death world. They were dangerous because of it. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what the universe needed to remember. That soft skin could hide hard resolve. That kindness wasn't weakness. That the species who'd clawed their way to the top of Earth's food chain hadn't forgotten how to claw. They'd just been waiting for a good reason. Rolk had given Naomi that reason. And the galaxy would spend the next few centuries making sure nobody made that mistake again. One broken face at a time.